Welcome to OMARanger004, and today we will cover the full story of Power Rangers Soul of the Dragon storyline. But before we start, please join me on Patreon by OMARanger004. Your small donation helps run the channel. With that out of the way, let's begin. 20 years after the events of Power Rangers Dino Thunder and the death of Mesogog, Tommy Oliver has completely left Ranger duties and has become an ordinary civilian operating as a school teacher. Having apparently moved from Reefside, California in the meantime, he now works at the high school in Bridgetown Township. Unfortunately, he is being laid off because the school board has shut down the entire science department, presumably due to lack of funding, which a friend of Tommy called Roger bemoans since even the kids adore him. Tommy and Catherine Hillard, who he has apparently met back up with and married in the intervening years, appreciate it, with the latter still being gobsmacked by the strange decision to axe the whole department. When an unnamed woman with them asks if he has any other jobs, Tommy just says that he doesn't know what to do now, whereas Kat, also a teacher, is going on a class trip to Treforia for a few weeks but will then be going on vacation with her husband to get away from it, although she insists he takes it easy in the meantime. Before he can object though, Head of Science David McCarthy takes the stage and reminds everyone of the bittersweet reason they are there before toasting to Tommy for being an amazing teacher, a fantastic husband and a great friend, before wishing him well. The next day, near Newtek City Spaceport, Tommy and Kat sit in their car waiting for a Space Patrol Delta checkpoint to clear them so that Kat can be dropped off for her school trip. In the intervening years since he was last a Ranger, Tommy has somehow gained a back problem, with Kat reminding him that he was supposed to have it examined. When he asks if she has talked to their son J.J. Oliver recently, she tells him that he rang to tell her of Varrock's radicals on Treforia as a warning due to her soon going there. Tommy questions why an army of SPD officers are guarding the spaceport entrance, but Kat reminds him of the gang war, but Tommy tells her it bothers him being unable to do anything. 20-30 years ago, they were reshaping worlds and saving millions if not billions of lives, with Kat reminding him that, but Tommy wonders if it actually made the world safer. Kat is sick of Tommy and his introspective depression, a now apparent common occurrence, before telling him that he has improved lives in all of his endeavors. They have a thriving society coexisting with aliens in an almost utopic world, all because of them defending the world in the past, and that the what-ifs don't matter in this case, since what's done is done, and this type of thought can only end badly. Tommy apologizes, but Kat just says it's due to his stress from being made redundant, but that he has earned the rest after all the things he's gone through, and they can finally sort things out once she returns from Treforia. After some flirting, after which Kat tells him she'll call him and his doctor when she touches down on Treforia, they kiss and she leaves whilst Tommy has more back pains. Presumably later that day, Tommy sees his doctor at Newtek City Hospital, where it is revealed that the problem is that part of his spine is being punched by his neck muscles and he should be crippled on the floor in pain. Though Tommy, being stubborn, brushes it off, the follow-up jolt to correct the issue makes him yell in pain, only to be relived right after, whilst the doctor reminds him that he has been intentionally putting off coming for 3 weeks. When Tommy apologizes, the doctor shrugs it off since it's not his decision when Tommy comes in whilst snarkily commenting that Tommy must be masochistic to put up with that pain. When the doctor asks about when the cybernetics on his back, he says it hasn't been recontacted since they were fitted, with the doctor clarifying after his car crash. Said car crash turns out to be an excuse to explain him getting slammed in the back by some kind of hairy rock abomination as the Mighty Morphin Green Ranger. Tommy reaffirms it and the doctor is impressed by him not having it checked for 8 years, but the leads are shot so they need a diagnostic within the next week for better replacements. As they part, The doctor gives the age-old idiom about age happening to the best of us, before getting his assistant to arrange another appointment on the following Tuesday. Even later, Tommy waxes nostalgic at his house whilst looking at a picture of himself and the original 5 other Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. After doing so, he looks over at his Master Morpher, now visibly cracked and smashed. We then flash back to him after his back was smashed, with the creature mocking him for being so legendarily powerful, but a single hit crippling him, and begs to be proven wrong. Tommy is all too happy to oblige and morphs into Mighty Morphin White before jump-kicking the monster across the battlefield, but this unfortunately cracks his morpher on the ground when it falls off of his belt buckle. In the middle though, Tommy gets a call which turns out to be from JJ, who mocks him for being up at 10 p.m. despite being old, with Tommy responding that he's a better crime fighter than a comedian. Noticing a scraping noise, Tommy confronts JJ, who says he is off to a concert at his friend Jack's, and Tommy gives up asking why a party is so late at night before making the usual old man comment about volume before his son asks about his departure party. Tommy says it was fine save for JJ's absence, who couldn't be there due to work at SPD, but he can't say what due to confidentiality, to which Tommy isn't very impressed, and then JJ asks about the doctor's visit and is told about the replacement. As JJ remarks about him having more than enough time for it, a black car with blacked out windows pulls up and JJ ends the call, though not before Tommy asks how long it'll be before the next call due to the several month difference, and suggests the next weekend. JJ asks for the weekend after that before they say their goodbyes, and the call hangs off immediately before Tommy takes his Master Morpher and leaves. A short while later, JJ gets out of the car only to be confronted by a gang of 4 thugs led by a blue-skinned alien who apparently plans to mug JJ and 6 his boys on him. JJ is completely overwhelmed and tries to run, only to be knocked down when a nearby wall explodes and confronted by someone off-panel who visibly horrifies him. An unspecified number of days later, Tommy is getting his groceries together from non-branded store only to have a humanoid enter his car and sit down unprompted. Introducing herself as Inara, she tells him that she is a friend of JJ's and an SPD cadet, and that JJ is in danger since he was supposed to meet her a few nights earlier, on the night of his call to Tommy, but never appeared, nor has anyone seen him or any calls gotten through. Tommy comments that it must be SPD being SPD, but Inara comments that JJ quit SPD for several weeks ago, to his immense surprise, for reasons he refuses to discuss, although she suspects that he outright doesn't trust Space Patrol Delta. Tommy outright asks if she is accusing SPD, but all she says is that she brought it up to her superiors and got stonewalled, before revealing that she knows his nature as a former Power Ranger and that JJ told her to come to him should she ever need to. Before leaving for her shift at SPD, she gives him her number before apologizing should she be proven wrong if Tommy manages to contact his son. After a moment of contemplation, Tommy calls JJ to find that the phone no longer exists before calling Kat and immediately asks when she last talked to JJ without even saying hello. Kat, having apparently landed on Triforia, obviously asks what he is on about, so he asks her if she has received word from him on Triforia, with the answer being, possibly Tuesday. Due to the uncertainty, he demands confirmation, which alerts her that something is wrong, so he admits what he knows, though Kat doesn't believe him since, even if JJ chose to lie to them, Sky wouldn't. However, Tommy reveals that he is in his car and going to meet Sky in person to at least try to debunk what Inara said. At the new Delta base, which is now either a satellite or is so big that it towers into space, Sky Tate, Commander-in-Chief of Earth's SPD branch, meets with Tommy, who apologizes for the interruption to his plans, but Sky just says he has a meeting later, although he is actually now late due to not checking the time. Taking a stroll through the base, Tommy is impressed by the cadet training room, which Sky brushes off and asks when he last came to SPD, which hasn't apparently been since the Rebel Run fight. Shocked, Sky mentions refitting the place since then, with Tommy commenting that that was because he nearly blasted himself out into space, with Sky having fond memories of it despite it nearly being the end of the world. Back to business, Sky asks Tommy if he misses morphing since there's nothing quite like it, which Tommy bitterly agrees to. Back in his office, Sky finally asks the million-dollar question as to what he wants, since it sounded urgent over the phone, with Tommy revealing what Inara said. Visibly frustrated at the mention of her, Sky asks him to elaborate, but Tommy finally confronts him about his suspiciously aloof demeanor, which finally breaks through to Sky, who admits that JJ did quit. When Tommy berates him for not letting him know, Sky says that he thought he'd already been told and thus it would be pointless, though Tommy reminds the commander how secretive both JJ and SPD are before finally demanding to know why his son quit. After asking him to calm down, Sky tells him that JJ was apparently spooked by something, though they don't know what, and they were giving him space to figure stuff out, and they didn't hear he had vanished until very recently. On a more personal note, Sky promises to find him if foul play occurred before asking Tommy to sit this out, which he reluctantly agrees to as he leaves. As is revealed later, Tommy has no intention of keeping his word as he packs whilst phoning Kat, who is surprised at his lack of trust in Sky, but Tommy reveals that he thinks Sky is intentionally deceiving him. When finally asked what he plans on doing, he reveals that he plans to join up with Inara and launch a personal investigation. When Kat sighs, Tommy takes offense as he believes it to be an objection and snaps at her, since he doesn't want to sit and twiddle his thumbs whilst his son is potentially badly hurt or worse. How competent can SPD be if it took them 2 full days to realize that he was missing? Reminding her that she told him to recognize all the good he has done over the ultimate futility of it, he comments that they have the means to help him and thus should, instead of potentially losing him altogether. However, Kat then reveals that she agrees, and the sigh was one of acceptance and not disappointment, with her only wish being for him to be extra careful. He hasn't used the Master Morpher in 8 years, and the last time he used it resulted in him getting crippled, though he tells her that it is only as an absolute last resort before hanging up and leaving. Later that night, Tommy has met up with Inara in his car and they discuss JJ's latest case, which was sorting out the recent uprise in gang violence. Strangely, single gang members have been able to slaughter dozens of other rival gang members in their own territory without as much as a scratch. Tommy asks what this has to do with them going down a wretched-looking abandoned back street, but apparently JJ has a contact named Maurice connected to someone only identified as the Witch, and this was their meeting place before his disappearance. To her surprise, Tommy gets out of his car and goes to find and confront Maurice, even as she tells him that this is apparently an alien-exclusive neighborhood who hate humans, with him brushing her off since she knows his past and thus he can take care of himself. Leaving Inara in the car, Tommy enters a bar only to be disgusted at the unpleasant manner in which they eat. Heading straight for the bar, he asks for a club soda due to driving, but notices a bunch of very muscly fugly aliens in a corner and asks about them to the bartender, whilst commenting they look like extras from a Prison Break movie if it were in space. When the bartender refuses to comment, presumably due to fear but justifying it as being rude to discuss other patrons behind their backs, Tommy prods him further and mentions he is looking for Maurice. Handing over a $20 bill, the bartender exits to presumably go and find Maurice, but one of the thugs from a moment ago spots Tommy staring at his entourage and confronts him for it. Being the stupid thuggish type, he immediately makes the assumption that the money exchange it to get them kicked out, and the bartender refuses to back him up because the brute apparently pays more. Tommy confronts Stupid and brooding about why he came and about Maurice, but the thug has his gang attack him instead before he is shocked to the ground. Refusing to listen to reason, the thug believes he is a cop and wants his men to torture him for information, which forces Tommy to morph into Dino Thunder Black. Understandably surprised, the gang pauses but soon goes back on the offensive, but are swiftly blasted away by the Brachio staff's fire strike and water strike. Getting a hold of the leader, he demands to know about Maurice, with the thug revealing the presence of a gang who want what this mysterious figure known as the Witch is selling. Maurice works with them and they operate out of a construction site before everyone in the bar legs it, and Inara storms in, where she is surprised to find Tommy morphed. Fleeing out the back of the bar, Inara asks why he morphed, with him just saying that he has been very out of practice, but suddenly demorphs in pain to his surprise since he didn't tell it to power down. Seeing the ruined morpher, Inara is surprised that it even still works and questions its safety before letting off some technobabble about its nature before Tommy corrects her about its name. When she questions who decided on the powers used, he just says he used whatever it decided to at that time and went with it, and thus. However, Inara reveals that the mechanism deciding which power it uses is fried, so he can only morph in a fixed order, but that isn't the only problem. The morpher is so borked that the mechanism destroys each individual power coin within a very short time frame. Soon, it will be completely inoperable entirely. Inara points out how ridiculously dangerous using a damaged morpher is, but Tommy replies that he has no choice since he has to save JJ, which justifies the risk. Dropping the subject for now, Inara asks if he at least got some information from the thug, but he decides that she is too young to be dealing with this dangerous business, but she reminds him that he was the one who just instigated a barroom brawl despite her warning. JJ is her friend and she came to him in the first place as the supposed adults ignored her, and thus this is kinda a cruel move to pull on her, and besides, he hasn't been a Power Ranger for 8 years and is out of the loop with him being unable to use his powers to save his own behind, and thus they need each other. A while later, the two, having agreed to work together off-panel, stand on a rooftop overlooking the construction site run by the gang mentioned before, now identified by Inara as the Iron Raptors. Said gang works on the west side of town mainly, but has been pushing for more territory as of late, but Tommy cuts off the exposition to ask how she knows so much about morphers. Inara reveals that her father worked on the Delta Morphers but has since died, but an arriving car with a powerful engine cuts the conversation short. Said car contains a bunch of cat-like aliens and a humanoid male with an extremely pronounced overbite who politely greets the Iron Raptors leader politely just to get a gruff "took y'all long enough" in return. The streets are very dangerous since a rival gang, the Megas, have been fighting back to gain territory and they need new gear to end the fighting. The dealer offers different variations on the product. Black increases strength, yellow increases speed, pink is great all around, E enhances all natural abilities, but the leader demands a demonstration to make sure they aren't being ripped off, so the dealer brings out one of his henchmen in a demonstration. Said henchman turns out to be JJ himself, to Tommy's horror, and crushes one of the products, now revealed to be a power crystal-like object, into dust, which turns him into a mighty Morphin Green Ranger-like individual. Tommy realizes that the crystals give special powers to the users whilst Inara questions why JJ is working for them, but Tommy just thinks that it's a form of mind control and they decide to tail the goons to try and rescue JJ. However, one of the Iron Raptors has managed to sneak up on them during the demonstration and holds Tommy at gunpoint whilst he tells Inara to get back and morphs into the Red Turbo Ranger, to the surprise of everyone nearby when the thug gets blasted full force into a wall. JJ is not happy whilst Tommy defeats the thugs and Inara shoots one that tries to sneak attack him before JJ blindsides Tommy and informs him that he shouldn't have come. When Inara comments that he shouldn't be doing this, the dealer realizes that he knows them, with JJ commenting that they've held him back for years, but this allows Tommy to grab him and appeal to the good in him, but gets blasted away instead. The gang flees and JJ looks back unhelmeted before Tommy passes out from the blast. A few minutes later, presumably, Inara revives him as the building starts to collapse due to the amount of walls demolished by people being blasted through them, but the entire building comes down immediately after she does so. Fortunately, the two of them survive due to the now unusable Red Turbo Ranger powers, just for Tommy to be crippled in pain as the collapse annihilated the servos on his back cybernetics. As Inara takes a look, Tommy tells her about JJ recognizing him, which she is pleased by, but Tommy tells her of the time that he was brainwashed by dark magic and attacked the mighty Morphin Power Rangers. He never hesitated or showed any signs of abating until they were all dead, which must mean that this is something JJ chose to do without mind control, though he doesn't know why, and laments being such an apparently bad father that his son went to his best friend and not his family with his problems. At this point though, Inara fixes the servos, though her funny look makes him suspicious. Inara reveals that her father wanted to be a ranger, but when he couldn't, he tried to push his dream onto her, and his heart was broken when she didn't make a squad due to it not being her dream, and she still thinks she let him down. JJ knows of Tommy's long legacy as a Power Ranger and has been living in his shadow, always feeling inadequate with no friends besides Inara. If he is doing this by choice, he is doing it to try and end the gang war and make his father proud, since who one's parents are have a major effect on their lives. Since sitting around feeling bad for themselves will help no one, Inara reveals that she picked up the green crystal JJ had during the fight and they can use it to track him down. Taking a good long look at the crystal, Tommy has an idea how, which confuses Inara. A little while later, the two are at some old run-down crappy-looking apartments whilst Inara questions why he would want to see Tommy after their less than friendly pasts together, but Tommy reassures her that this is why he will be happy to see them. He turns out to be Finster, formerly the master sculptor and monster designer for Rita Repulsa and the evil space aliens. Zordon's energy wave spared him like it did Rita, Lord Zed and Divatox, although he retains his inhuman anthropomorphized dog-like form unlike the others who became fully human. He welcomes them in warmly and refuses Tommy's apologies for the lack of warning because he has nothing much to do these days. Why he was purified is never made clear, but it was probably because he is not maliciously evil and more chaotic neutral, simply being a misguided but loyal sculptor. In the 25-odd years since the end of the United Alliance of Evil, he has retained his position as a sculptor, although he is now making humanoid molds instead of monsters now. Inara is taken aback at his sculpture work as Tommy introduces her to a delighted Finster, who then asks why they came, and Tommy produces the crystal. Finster is visibly horrified at it as he wants nothing more to do with magic, but Tommy tells him of the stakes surrounding JJ and Finster finally accepts. Taking the crystal, He believes that it is trackable with a simple spell which he casts PFF panel and uses it to pinpoint the source as coming from Paston's tower, but comments that only one person is capable of wielding such powerful dark magic. Realizing that this is why Tommy got into contact with him, he is distraught when Tommy comments that the mastermind is calling themselves the Witch, and Inara immediately realizes that they are talking about Finster's former mistress Rita Repulsa. Confused, she asks how it would be possible after Zordon's energy wave purified her, but Finster simply says that it made her good, but being good or bad is something she could have chosen at any time afterwards. Knowing Rita's power, Finster gives them a portal-esque cube that will release a charge to disable all of Rita's magic for several minutes, though it can only be used once. Tommy embraces his friend and thanks him for his help and congratulates him on his successful life, with Finster concurring. Sometime after leaving, Tommy and Inara skulk along the rooftops towards Paston's tower with no apparent plan due to not knowing what they are up against. However, Tommy reveals that the next power coin up is Zeo Ranger V, and that the Zeo crystal shards which supply them with power are supposed to increase with time. After 40 years of off and on use but mostly sitting gathering power, he should be nigh unstoppable, and thus he can make the cliché full-on assault whilst Inara sneaks in. Morphing, Tommy smashes through the front door and decimates the guards to the annoyance of nearby JJ. Inara takes this to mean that he doesn't appreciate the rescue, but he corrects her. He's undercover and all of his talk about quitting SPD was a ruse to try and hide the truth. At the right time, he would have called Sky and set up a sting operation to bring down the Witch and her operation, but the two have bungled the operation just as the Witch is making her move. Tommy, unaware of the truth, tries to talk him down, but Inara tells him the truth and JJ comments that he told them to stay away, but Tommy berates him for attacking him. JJ points out that there wasn't much of a choice since he shot a guy straight through a wall and refusing to attack would have blown his cover, but a new voice pipes up, amused to find out that JJ is Tommy's son, which is fitting for their plans. Turning, all three see the Witch, a figure resembling Rita but with a giant black cloak over her face, who thinks the revelation almost makes his betrayal worth it and that she must savor the chance to manipulate Tommy and his son. Tommy threatens to shut off Rita's magic and make her helpless, but the Witch just laughs at him for being so unobservant, and JJ tells Tommy that the Witch isn't Rita at all, to his astonishment. The Witch then unmasks to reveal herself as actually being Scorpina, who has not been seen for nearly 40 years. Inara refuses to believe that nothing about Scorpina is magic, so blasts her with the box as Tommy orders JJ and her to withdraw. Unfortunately, Scorpina has been unfazed by the blast and attacks Tommy from behind, only to be blown away by JJ and Inara's blasters. As Tommy weakens though, Scorpina prepares to blast him away with her wand, only for Inara and Tommy to dive out of the building to their supposed deaths. Alone with JJ, Scorpina compliments him on his father's sacrifice and that her master will be pleased before transporting herself and JJ away. Fortunately, Tommy and Inara have survived their plunge thanks to Tommy's last ranger powers, and he revives Inara a while after JJ's kidnapping. Tommy's back is fine, but his Zeo powers are no more, and Scorpina and JJ were long gone by the time that he got back up to the penthouse. Tommy decides to return to Finster to see if there is more he can do to help them, and he offers to leave Inara there, but she decides to tag along anyway. Unfortunately, by the time they return to Finster's workshop, they find that he has been murdered by Scorpina, presumably since she realized that he gave them the cube to stop Rita. After shutting Finster's eyes, Inara gives condolences, but Tommy shrugs them off and realizes that Scorpina came due to him mentioning Finster before Scorpina revealed herself. However, Tommy sees a statue of Finster himself that wasn't there before, only for the statue to come to life since Finster crafted it shortly before his death and as his first creation since his villainous days to be given true life as well as his last. Finster statue reminisces on the real Finster's life and realizes that this is payback for all his evil, and it is Finster's last creation to give Tommy hope for the future. After Tommy left, Finster did more research into the crystals and found that the energy required to bring them to Earth is far too much for even Rita or Zed to accomplish, and only one being can bring them to create them. Lokar the Terrible. Lokar has not been seen in 40 years since the defeat of Cyclopsis, so this comes as a very understandable surprise to Tommy. Using old contacts, Finster established that Scorpina plans on using JJ as a sacrifice to Lokar for immense power, with the demon being satisfied at the misery it would cause to one of his oldest enemies. As it turns to dust, the statue reveals that the sacrifice is very quick before apologizing for its creator's past actions and reassuring him that he can save JJ before turning into lifeless powder. Afterwards, Tommy takes a picture of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Finster has and doubts his own abilities, since everything that has occurred since Inara came to see him has gone horribly wrong. JJ was pushed so hard to impress Tommy that he eventually ended up as a sacrificial lamb, and now Finster is dead. Inara tells him, however, that what's done is done and we can't change the past, as well as reminding him of the stakes and that only he can save JJ. Just as she says this, Tommy's phone rings and what he sees shocks him. In some nearby mountains, Scorpina sets up a candle ritual as JJ, tied to a rock, asks if she is going to kill him, and she responds that Lokar needs a sacrifice, but JJ asks what happened to her since she has gone from feared warrior and scourge of the Power Rangers to a flunky dancing around for a giant floating head. Scorpina responds that she doesn't have to tell him anything, but JJ points out that she is about to kill him, so why not monologue? Relenting, she explains the truth. 20 years ago, Scorpina became disillusioned with Rita and began to desire power, so started to read her spell books. However, it was a trap, probably set to either test her loyalty or to find who had been breaking into her library, and she was banished to the Talos dimension, where she was found and rescued by Lokar, the dimension's ruler and Rita's former despondent henchman. She tried to get him to send her back, but he refused until Zordon's energy wave wiped out his allies, and he decided that he had no choice but to use her as an envoy. He sends her back to Earth, but, due to time moving slower in the Talos dimension than on Earth, she appears roughly 8 years after the defeat of Omni and the Trubian Empire. The powered crystals that she has been supplying the gangs with are actually beacons to draw Lokar to Earth as he desires, so that he can conquer it. Scorpina has promised Lokar a tribute, and she will give it to him so that he will give her the power she craves. More than that of Rita, and will allow her to ascend from minion and foot soldier to take her rightful place as a true villain. However, someone finds it very unimpressive, and she turns to see Tommy as Mighty Morphin White, and JJ reveals that she didn't search him very well since he has kept a transmitter on himself which allowed SPD to track him. Unconcerned, Scorpina and an army of loyal thugs heavily outnumber Tommy, and thus this lone white knight stick won't work. Unfortunately for Scorpina, Tommy isn't alone, as he is joined by Inara, an army of Space Patrol Delta officers, Kat, the Blue Centurion, and Bridge Carson. Determined not to fail, Scorpina and her forces do battle and jump slashes Tommy down, only to be blasted by Kat, who then rescues JJ even as Scorpina pulls out some of her power crystals and shatters them to earn a giant increase in power. As the group start to retreat, JJ notices something and declares that they have bigger issues, just as a giant clawed hand lunges and sends Tommy flying into a wall. The threat turns out to be a titanic metal Scorpina who is more scorpion-like than ever. As the group gawk at her, Scorpina slams the ground hard enough to send them all flying before picking up JJ in one hand and prepares to crush him for her master even as everyone fires at her to utterly no effect and the Blue Centurion futility demanded her surrender. Fortunately, Tommy has an idea and throws his final morph, Mighty Morphin Green, to JJ who then uses it to morph into Mighty Morphin Green and break free. As he beats down her thugs, Scorpina claims that it is futile but then Lokar arrives, having gotten bored of nothing happening and come to punish his minion. Scorpina asks for a moment further to capture JJ but Lokar knows how hard even reaching out into our dimension is so decides to take her as his tribute instead and sucks him back into the Talos dimension. With Lokar and Scorpina gone, SPD and the Blue Centurion round up what's left of Scorpina's gang, most having been sucked in along with their leader, as Tommy and JJ finally bond over his new powers and the family embraces. Weeks later, JJ and Inara see Tommy and Kat off even as JJ, now apparently made the SPD Green Ranger for his efforts in stopping Scorpina given his attire, tries to talk them into sticking around but they have decided to go on holiday for a while before settling down, which is something they'll discuss on holiday. JJ asks if he will miss being a Power Ranger but Tommy has decided to finally get go and move on with his life after spending so much time fighting evil. When JJ snarks that he did just use up his powers, and thus he didn't have much of a choice but to abandon the life, Tommy reminds him that it was him who used them up. In conclusion, Tommy decides that it was fun being a Power Ranger but that is a job for the young and more able-bodied. Kat and JJ hug one last time as she asks him to stay in touch as Tommy and Inara do the same with her having been glad to meet him but he reminds her that he only did this due to having such great help. As Tommy and Kat leave by boat, JJ's Delta Morpher goes off and he is alerted to an issue off-planet which he and Inara need to attend to. The comic then ends with Inara citing Jason Lee Scott's catchphrase, "Back to action," and a splash panel of the new SPD Green Dragon Ranger. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more videos about your favorite comics, movies are coming soon. Join me on Patreon by Omaranger004. Your small donation helps run the channel. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.